Good morning everyone, welcome back to the channel, welcome back to another video. Kind of carrying on today from the last video where we started to take apart the Fiesta's engine right here. I stripped pretty much 90% of the ancillary parts off the engine. I didn't go as far as to like take the cam belt and the head off, but that is what we're going to be doing today. I'm going to go ahead and time the engine up. I'm going to be putting a new belt on this thing and I want it to be in time when I do so. This is currently how the engine looks. If you haven't watched the last video where I stripped this completely down and took all of these parts that are on here off, I recommend go back, watch that, and you'll be able to see sort of how we did that process. But at this point, like I said, we've still got the cam belt on, like so. The crankshaft pulley is still on as well. I'm going to have to figure out a way of getting this off. I'm not entirely sure how we're going to go about that yet. But once that is off, I can take the last little cover on the bottom, and I can release the tension, take the belt off. But before I do that, I want to get this thing timed up, which means I'm going to remove the spark plugs because they're still in. I didn't take them out last time. So all 4 spark plugs are going to come out. I'm going to take the valve cover off the top so that I can see the camshafts. And then I'm going to rotate this until we're top dead center in cylinder 1, and so that our camshafts are in the right position as well. I've kind of done a little bit of research and I know somewhat how to time this engine up. It's pretty simple. And then once that's done, I'm going to put my camshaft tool in, which is what I picked up here. I picked this up on eBay. It was like $12.99. This is kind of a generic universal timing tool for a bunch of different engines. We've got Ford, Mazda, Volvo. It covers all those engines there, the 1.2 all the way up to the 2.3 Duratec engines, and it covers all right there. It's got a bunch of different tools in it. I'm not going to be using all of these. I think I can use the camshaft one, which is this long one on the side. I can use the pin for the tensioner, and I think one of these does the crankshaft, but I'm not entirely sure. We'll get to that in a second. So that is essentially today's plan, just more stripping down of the engine. I want to get this engine into as many small bits as I possibly can. I want the head to be on my workbench by the end of today so I can sort of look it over and see what I'm going to be doing with that. I did also read through the comments on the last video. I asked a few questions on that. Number one, I said, should I do a full rebuild on the engine? And pretty much 90% of you said that I should. Whilst I've got it out and whilst I've got it in this situation, it kind of makes sense to do so. That was really the plan all along. I just wanted to ask for your feedback as well. So we are doing a full rebuild on this, which means a full head rebuild, piston rings as well and stuff like that. We're going to go full and go crazy with this thing and make it like a really nice, pretty much brand new engine by the end of this series, so that should be good. I also asked you what color I should paint the block, and most of you said either silver or black. It's probably going to go silver because black you don't really see, so it's probably going to be silver block, and I might end up painting the head as well. We'll see how we go, but without talking too much at the start of this one, let's get cracking on this thing, strip down what we need to, get the engine timed up so we can finally start getting the block of the engine apart. I appreciate, by the way, that the lighting in here is not the best. The lights that I've got in the shed are pretty naff, to be honest with you. This valve cover I'm going to take off first. This is held on by 8mm. There's just a bunch all the way around and then a couple in the middle where the spark plugs usually are. I'm just going to whip this off real quick. Hopefully they'll come out nice and easy. Stuck on there. I need a little persuasion with a hammer. Just going to give it a couple of whacks with a rubber mallet, or a dead blow hammer. There we go. Alright, there's that. Just give you a quick look at what that looks like under there. There's the camshafts. Here's the bearing, I can't remember what they're called, they've got a special name. Bearing caps, that's it. These are the bearing caps here with the 2 bolts to hold them in. That's all. It looks pretty healthy in there, to be honest. It's pretty clean. Not any like horrible. Sometimes in these old engines, if they haven't had enough oil changes, there's like a build up in there, like old oil, burnt oil, and that really starts to mess around with stuff. But this looks pretty clean in here, to be honest with you. All looks pretty damn good. So someone's looked after this engine. All the cam lobes look good as well. Absolutely no scoring or anything on any of these. Barely any like wear marks either. They look kind of new. Strangely, look. See how shiny they are? Usually they have like a wear mark where they've constantly been in contact with the hydraulic lifters, but these look good. Happy about that. Now I'm quickly going to whip these spark plugs out. Got easy access to them now, as you can see. These 4 spark plugs right here. Just going to quickly take them out just so I I'm not fighting resistance. If I'm trying to get the I've got to turn over the engine, you see, with a ratchet on the crankshaft pulley, and I'm fighting against the compression. If these spark plugs are in this, I'm just going to take them out. I'm going to stick a screwdriver in cylinder 1, which is this one closest to the cam belt, and you'll be able to tell when it's top dead center, because the screwdriver will be at its highest point and it'll start to go down again. Also, another thing to note is, if you look in the end of these camshafts, can you see that there is a slit in there? You should be able to get this bar, which I showed you earlier in this timing kit. You should be able to get that bar slotted in there, and it'll slot into both of these camshafts, and that'll lock them in place. So that's what I've got to do as well. It might actually be pretty much there now, because these line up pretty damn well, so we might not be far off timed up anyways. Now, spark plugs won't be in there too tight. I've got myself a 16mm spark plug socket. Just going to quickly whip these out. Can check the condition of them as well while we're got them out. Right, there we go. Someone did say in the last video that the sensor in here between the spark plugs is a cylinder head temperature sensor. I didn't realise this engine would have one of them, because that sounds quite sort of futuristic in terms of this engine. This is 2002, so I've never seen an engine with one of them before, or not that I'm aware of. Spark plugs look good though. Can you see them? That's cylinder 3 and 4. Nothing too worrying there. Now, I don't know how I'm about to show you this. I've got myself an extension. I was going to use a screwdriver, but I've got an extension here. I put it in cylinder 1, and I think we're pretty much at top dead center already, because the piston is right there at the top of the spark plug hole, so I think we're pretty much already good. But I'm going to give it a rotation anyway, and I'll just show you what happens to this. Hopefully you'll be able to see it on the camera. You'll be able to see what I'm going for here. I'm just going to use a ratchet with an 18mm on the crankshaft just to spin it around. If you can see this will move up as the piston comes up, obviously, like so. Now, there's two ways that the engine could be for this to be at its highest. It's now at its highest. You probably just saw it come up. There you go. It's not going to go any lower now. But the engine is 180 degrees at the moment, 180 degrees out of time. And the way you can tell that, if you come down the end of the camshafts again, like we did before, you can see that the slots are at the bottom. It's really hard to explain, but you wouldn't be able to get that tool in there. If you look, the tool wouldn't go in there because the slots are further down. Hang on. There's more metal on this top bit here than there is on the bottom, so this bit has to be on the top so that you can get the tool in there. It's really hard to explain and give a proper example, but you'll see when I rotate the engine 180 degrees again, this part will be on top, and you'll be able to get the tool into this crevice here. So that's the best way of determining whether your engine is in time or not. The little grooves in the end of the camshafts is your best telltale sign, I think. So if I go ahead and rotate this again, going clockwise just in case you're wondering, but it goes down, as you see, down to the bottom, and it starts to come back up again. And that right there is near on top dead center, and you'll see that you can actually get the tool in there now if you look from that angle, where we need to go a little bit more, like a slight rotation more, so that you get the idea. That would actually now fit in there now. Now I'm going to go ahead and open up our tool that we need. You don't have to buy this special tool just for this. You just need a bar that is that width. Anything will work really. Just a normal piece of metal bar will go in there fine. But this should sit on there and then slot, if we're lined up alright, slot into there. You might need to just tweak it a little bit and play around with it. This side's in, essentially, but we might need to just go that way a tiny bit, just anti-clockwise, the tiniest little smidge. Right, so after a little bit of wiggling and manoeuvring, you can see I've got the tool fully seated in there. Apologise for the lighting, but it's fully seated in there, fully seated in there, and those camshafts will no longer move and you can't turn the engine over. We now know that our whole engine is in time. I'm going to quickly make a couple of marks on these camshaft sprockets. I'm just going to make a mark here and here, just so that when I come to put this back together, I can make sure that these little marks are lined up. And then I'll also, once I get the crankshaft pulley off, I'll just make a little mark on the pulley that's behind this cover, so I know where that's got to be as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and use some of my nice new nail varnish that I bought the other day. I bought a nice new red one to match my heels. So I'm just going to stick a little bit of this, like I said, on the sprockets. You can see that those two red marks are now on there, so I know that if they're lined up, then we are definitely in time. Now, because we've got this bar in the end here, the chance of getting the camshafts not in time is almost impossible. As long as you keep this bar in here, or as long as you put this bar back in when it comes to reassembly, the chances are you can't get this wrong. The sprockets will also have, once we take these off, I'll show you, once we take these bolts out, behind these there'll be a little like locating pin on the actual sprocket on the back, which means you can't put these sprockets on wrong either onto the camshaft. So the chances of getting the top half timing wrong is pretty much foolproof, to be completely honest with you, and I'll show you more of that once we actually come to put it back together. You really can't go too wrong with the top. It's the same really with the bottom, to be honest with you. As long as you don't move the bottom, which I don't plan to, once the belt is off, I don't plan on messing around with the bottom half at all. So the chance again of that being out of time, highly unlikely, but I'll put marks on there because it's better safe than sorry at the end of the day, isn't it? It's better to have them than to not have them. Now, I was just looking at this because I assumed that you can lock the crank in by putting in like a pin in the side, but I've been looking around the engine and I can't seem to find anywhere which you can put a pin in to lock it. I saw this bolt here. I did see this bolt on the back here where I thought that might be the place to put it, but that seems so far away that I don't think it is. So we might have to try and crack this loose now that we've got the top ones locked in. We might have to try and crack this loose, but I don't want to destroy the belt before I take it off. That's the only problem. Now I've got my breaker bar out. I really don't want to, like I said, I don't want to damage the belt, but I am just going to try, now that I've got the camshafts locked in, cracking this loose. That belt's going to snap, I can feel it. This is not the right way to do it. Maybe I should have a quick read online. Right, so I just had a look in the trusty Haynes. You can never go wrong with having one of these. I picked one of these up a while ago whilst I was doing some other jobs. This is the in-car procedure for the Zetec SE petrol engine, which is what mine is, as you can see. And it does say that there's a blanking plug on the right-hand rear side of the cylinder block, which you put a locking tool in. So I was right. I think that it's this locking pin, or this one of the two. But there is a bolt on the back, which is, I think, the one that I pointed out a second ago. That one right there. I think that one you take out so that you can put a pin in to lock it. It does kind of make sense. I remember it being similar to my Corsa one. I had to do something like that. But that looks like the one. This looks like the timing belt side. And that looks like the bolt. So I'm going to take it out and we'll see what happens. But that little thingy there, it does look like one of these, doesn't it? Now, the bolt in question is this one right here, and it's a 10mm. I'm going to sit you there for a sec. Just going to crack this loose. That's tight. I'm just going to grab one of those other tools and see if we'll see which one will fit in there, because there's two to choose from. Right, so I've got two of them here, as you can see. It says in the book, it says one's a timing tool and one's a locking pin. Right, so I just did a bit more reading in the Haynes manual, like I should have done really in the first place. I should have done a bit more research. Turns out that these two things do different things. The thinner one here, like I showed you, this is the timing tool. You put this in whilst your engine's at top dead center, and it stops the crank from spinning clockwise at all. It sort of stops the crank in position, which is what I wanted. And this thicker one here is the, hang on, let me check. the locking tool. This is used for when you're putting the engine back together and you want to tighten the crankshaft bolt. This is the one that's used for that. So this, you put this in and then it allows the crankshaft to be still whilst you tighten it and whilst you torque it down to the spec. So this one I don't use now. This one I do use now. This is the timing tool, like I just said. I still don't know how I'm going to get the crankshaft bolt off though, because if I can't, it says not to use one of these to lock the crankshaft to undo it, because these can snap and this will end up in the engine. So it doesn't say how you actually take that off, I don't think. I'll do a bit more reading, but that's kind of the gist. This one's going to go in and it essentially just sits there and stops the crank from turning, which is nice and easy. Just put that in. So with that in and with the bar in the camshafts, we now know that the engine is in time, top and bottom, and it's not gonna move at all, which is good. I still need to figure out how this bolt's gonna come off though, so I'm gonna do a bit more research and then I'll come back. So it says in the Haynes manual that to loosen the bolt on the crankshaft, you have to make some sort of homemade tool to do it, and it doesn't tell you how to make the homemade tool. I've got a better idea. Well, that definitely wasn't supposed to happen. I thought by getting my big corded 1/2" impact dart, that would take that off. It's done. I've taken off really tight crankshaft bolts in the past with that thing on an Astra, I think I did one, and on a Corsa. But this bolt is extremely tight, and I don't know what to do. It doesn't say anything in the Haynes manual about how to take it off. I'm hoping that one of you is going to tell me down in the comments the best way to do it, because I'm kind of stuck without being able to take that off. I can go ahead and remove the timing belt still. I don't need to take this off to remove the timing belt, which I might actually do because the tensioner is right here, so I can get to that, no problem. And that will allow me to take the belt off, and then I can take the head off at least. I think it's probably going to be the plan of action until I can figure out how I'm going to get this stupid bolt off. That's what I'm going to have to do. I'm going to have to just work around it for now and then address it at a later date. On another note, how does my tea look today? I got absolutely grilled in the last video about my tea being a funny colour. Does that look a bit healthier? The reason it was so milky, I'm not going to name any names or blame anyone, but I wasn't the one that made it. Just take that how you want to take it. Now, the tensioner setup on this is hasn't got like a Allen key or anything to tension it, so I'm not entirely sure how you're supposed to do it. But to release the tension off it, I'm just going to stick like a pry bar or a screwdriver in here, and I just need to push it to the left. And then there's a little hole that will appear in this little slit. And I've got a pin in my new kit that can go in there, and that'll just hold the tension, and that'll allow me to take the belt off then. So this is the little tensioner pin that you get. You could probably end up using something else, as long as it's that size, it doesn't really matter too much. I'm just going to use a screwdriver in here. Hopefully you'll be able to see this alright. But you should see the hole up here, can you see that? Just slot that in there, and then you can see we've got slack on our belt now. It's a little tight on there still, but just sort of working it slowly bit by bit. There we go. So that's the belt free, as you can see. Just going to have to leave that down the bottom there for now whilst we work on other bits. Right, so in order to get to the head bolts on this thing, the head bolts are actually underneath the camshafts. They look like they're Torx bolts on this. There's 10 of them, so 5 each side. And to access them, obviously the camshaft's going to have to come out, which means that these cam covers are going to have to come. What did I call them earlier? A cap, a bearing cap. There you go. These bearing caps are going to have to come off. Just a bunch of 10 mils. I'm just going to sort of crack each one of them loose and then work them out, just so that I don't put any stress on the camshafts. And then we can get, like I said, to the head bolts. I'm using my new favourite 1/4" ratchet to break these loose. Just gonna, like I said, just crack them all a tiny bit and then work them out. These aren't very tight anyway. I think they're like, if I remember from other engines, about 15 Newton meters or something. So they're not awfully tight to undo. Right, these are all now cracked off enough that I can just whiz them out. I'll try and keep the bolts in the same place so I know where they go. Right, I'm going to keep these in order. When I put them on my workbench, I'm going to lay them in order of where I took them off, just so I know where they're going to go. Right, so with them out, we've got our camshafts in there. You may think to yourself, well, what was the point in putting that timing tool in there? Honestly, there wasn't really one. Until we put this back together, we don't really need this in there. I was just showing you, for the sake of the video, that this is where this goes. But because we're taking these camshafts out, you know, this is going to have to be moved anyway. So we'll take that out real quick, so it's out of our way. And then we can just lift up on these camshafts. I might need 2 hands though. These should now just lift out with any luck. Why are they not lifting out? Might just need a little bit of persuasion. Just use a little mallet on the end. There we go. They do get a little bit stuck in there. For some reason I can't take that off. Right, well that's interesting. I haven't come across this before, but I can't take the camshafts out without taking the sprockets off, it seems. It's fouling on the engine just here. You see where that bolt hole is right there where my finger is? It's sort of fouling on that there, and there's no other way of lifting it out. I've never come across that before. Usually on the engines I've worked on before, you can lift the camshaft and the sprocket out all at once. Just you lift it straight up and it just pops out. This engine's obviously different, so I was going to put this all back together so I can crack these bolts loose, but I'm just going to use an impact. That's easier on that. I'm going to hold the camshaft with a spanner. There's actually a hex piece on the camshaft which you can hold with the spanner. 21mm fits on there nice, and then 13mm socket on the impact. Should just whiz this off. There we go. That saves a whole bunch of time messing around with them. Oh, they are different actually. They haven't got a locating pin on the back either. You know, I said that there was going to be like a little locating pin on the back. There isn't, which is interesting. It's a good job I put those little marks on there really, so I know where they're going to go. What do you know? Same to the other one. Spanner on. And with those off, the camshaft should come off. You've got a camshaft seal on the end there. Probably end up, oh, I will end up changing them. So I'll take them off now before I forget. This rear camshaft is stuck in there a little bit, so I'm just going to use just a tiny little tap on the end, upwards, just to free it. There you go. There's one. This is the exhaust side camshaft. Right, so here's a little look underneath the camshaft, just in case you've never seen inside an engine like this. Head bolts in there, they look like probably a T50, T45, something like that. So they're the next thing to come out. I won't worry about taking the lifters and stuff out yet. I'll do that once the head is on the bench. but the valves are then under there, and you'll see them as well. My torch just went out. That's kind of it really. Again, all looks nice and clean in here. I'm very happy with the condition of the engine. Someone's definitely taken care of it. Right, let's crack these head bolts loose, although just a couple of bolts. There's one bolt there to take off as well for the timing cover. I think that's all on that side. I don't think there's anything else on the other side holding it. I just want to show you this as well real quick. Whenever I work on an engine, whenever I take one apart especially, I like to put things on the workbench in the order that they come off the engine. So these are the bearing caps, like you just saw me take off. These are the exhaust side, these are the intake side, and I've made sure that I've left them in the exact orientation that they came out with. The bolts are in exactly the same place, and you can see the intake and exhaust, and that's how they'll go back on once they're all cleaned up and stuff. And it's the same with the camshafts. I put them exhaust, intake, so if you're looking at the engine from the front, which you do, this stuff will go on front, rear, just kind of makes things easier. I'll do the same when I take out the hydraulic lifters as well. I'll make sure I line them up along in the correct place, so just helps to keep everything organized, and that's quite important really. Now the head bolts are T55s, Torx 55s, the star bit, that should fit in there nicely. I'll just get a ratchet and go ahead and crack all them. I'm sure there's probably a correct way of doing this, so I'm going to quickly have a look in the trusty Haynes just to make sure that I don't do it wrong. So the Haynes manual's got a tightening sequence, but it doesn't have a loosening sequence. You can see at the top of this picture right here, it shows you that you start in the middle top, or the exhaust side, and go do, and then sort of like in a star pattern. So I'm kind of just going to go the opposite of this. Kind of makes sense to do that. So I'll start at the number 10, and then go 9, 8, 7, 6, and just sort of crack them off that way. Right, so we're going to start in the bottom left, which is here, using my decently long snap-on 3/8 for this, just to get some leverage on it. Cool, they're tight. I might need something more than this. I've had to get the 1/2" breaker bar out for this because the snap-on wasn't man enough for it apparently. There we go. Just 1/2 turn, and it's this one. I think you get the point, don't you? Last one. Right, it should be good with a ratchet now. I'm going to be putting new head bolts in this thing, so I'm not worried about reusing these really, or where they go. Like most head bolts, these are probably stretch bolts, so once you use them once, they're not really any good another time anyway. So I'll probably stick some new ones in, makes sense, doesn't it? God, they're hard to get out though, they're like recessed. Let me get a magnet. Right, so like we did in the last video, I showed you the 1/4" ratchet, which is sort of like tool of the day. Tool of the day today is something a lot simpler though. These are about £2 or £3 off eBay. You can pick them up at any sort of tool store as well. Simple, a magnet. An extendable magnet as well if you can get one. These things are so useful to pick out. Say you drop a bolt down in an engine bay, extend this down, boop, got it. And for stuff like this, if you can't get your fingers in the head to get the bolts out, you just stick this in and it'll just pick it up. Out it comes. They're extremely strong for how small they are, and you can just go along, bolt, 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 instead of having to faff around all that stupid stuff. That's all of them. Just took those bolts out, all 7 of them, in like a few seconds. So tool of the day, get yourself a magnet. And before the head can be removed, there is one more bolt. Just where my finger is, you can't see it because behind this bolt. It's a little 8mm, which just holds the rear timing belt cover on. That's the only thing that's holding this to the head, and then the head will be ready to lift off. So I'm just going to whip that out real quick. Just a little 8mm. And then the head is ready to be lifted off now. It's going to be stuck on there a little bit. We'll just use the bolts to pull up on. Not missing anything, am I, mate? Might just have to bring out a little bit of persuasion, usually a little mallet like this or something. Just give it a few taps on each corner upwards. So if you hit it going up, then it should just pop off or loosen up. You see a bit of movement there. Just going to hit it in each corner because I can. Ah, nearly missed that. There's another bolt. There's another little 8mm holding the timing belt cover on the back. I didn't see that. There we go. Cheeky little thing nearly got away. But now it's ready to come off. Are you ready? Ta-da! There you go. One cylinder head off of a Ford Fiesta Zetec S. Well, there she is. She is off the block. I'm just going to have a look at the bottom of it. That's the only part we haven't seen. This is the mating surface where the head gasket will sit. It's actually still on the engine at the minute. I'll pull that off in a second, but yeah, this is where the head gasket will be. These are the valves. We've got our intake valves, exhaust valves. It's all pretty tidy, a bit sooty as you'd expect of an engine of this age, but everything looks alright. I'll give it a good inspection and make sure it's not cracked or anything like that. I didn't have any symptoms of it, so I like to think that it's all in good working order. Looks pretty decent first off. All the water jackets are still in good shape. These are little bits around here, these holes that go all the way around each cylinder. That's where the coolant will flow through. There's a little something in there, I don't know what that is. Little piece of something, looks like metal or rust or something. That just fell out of that water jacket just there. There's another one there. I think it's just sort of build up and deposits. There's a big old one in this one. Ugh. It's quite hard, it's like metal. Strange, isn't it? Someone did tell me the name of these things when I did the last engine. Can't remember what you said. Moving over to the actual block itself, these are the pistons, as you will know. And the head gasket is still on here. It looks in good shape. There's no signs of any sort of wear on the head gasket at all. Looks pretty good. Didn't have any problems with the head gasket. There's a bit of build up in the coolant, but that'll all be getting flushed out. Looks good. Top of the pistons look alright. Not even that suited up really compared to what I have had in the past. Let's see if we can get this head gasket off. That's proper on there. Pretty decent strip down. I'm going to take these bits off as well. Water pump tension is going to come off. And if someone could please let me know how this crank's going to come off, I would love to know. So I just want to show you this real quick. You remember that tool, the timing tool that I put in the back earlier? This one right here. I put that in the inspection hole. That holds the crankshaft like I showed you. I can turn the whole engine by hand. As you can see, the pistons go up and down if I turn the crank. But if I turn it to the point where this one is top dead center, which is piston 1, once that's top dead center, you listen. That hits the pin, so it can't go any further. So that's how you know that you are top dead center on the bottom, which is quite cool actually. It's a good little thing, but it does mean that you can't crack it loose because it still spins anti-clockwise, just doesn't spin clockwise, which is annoying. Right, so that's the head off, as you've seen. I'm quite happy with that so far. I'm going to go and have my tea now because it is tea time. I'm going to do a bit of research whilst I eat my tea, have a bit of a Google, and see if I can figure out the best way to get that crank pulley off. If I'm going to have to make a tool, and that's what we'll do, if I can find like a picture or a diagram of the tool that I need to make to be able to like hold the crank pulley, then we can do that. That might make an interesting video, to be honest with you. So if I can do that, I will. If I can think of anything else, or if I come up with anything else, I'm going to come back out here after my tea. That's the beauty of being in my shed, is whether it's dark outside, well, it will be dark by the time I come out. So if it's dark outside, switch the lights on, and I can crack back on with the engine. That is one of the great things about having it here in the shed. It means I can work on it day and night. So I'll catch you guys in a minute once I come back out. God, why is it so tight? I've got a breaker bar on it, it's 1/2 inch, and a piece of exhaust all the way up to there. It's just not breaking loose. What on earth is going on? Right, so I'm back again. It's actually dark outside, like I said it probably would be. It's pretty much pitch black out there, but I'm in the light of the shed, so I'm all good. As you've just seen, I've tried to do the crankshaft again. I really don't think I'm going to be able to do it on my own. I have to sort of hold the crankshaft still whilst trying to break it loose, whilst trying to hold the actual engine stand still as well, because the engine stand wants to lift up because I'm pushing up, obviously. Oh, I'm gonna have to wait till my dad comes or ask my next door neighbour to help me or something, because that's been such a pain. I did see a bunch of people online were saying that on theirs this was just stupidly tight, and it is. I had a breaker bar on it, like this big breaker bar right here, and the exhaust pipe on it, and I was holding the other end with a crowbar. I stuck a couple of the bolts in the crankshaft in the end for the flywheel bolts, and that's holding it fine. It's being held fine, that's not the problem now. But when I lift up, the engine stand wants to lift up, and also I'm trying to like use the breaker bar. It's not fun. It's really not fun on my own. It's definitely a two-person job. This is just so tight. My impact guns can't do it. The breaker bar can't. That's just madness. I'm going to finish off today's video though by the water pump's going to come off. That's nice and easy. Just a few 8mm, and then I'm also just going to take the tensioner off, just because I can get them out of the way. So I can just see everything a bit clearer. Whilst I was trying to break the crankshaft loose as well, I am sorry to say we have a casualty. This is the timing tool that I used on the crankshaft. Snapped. So we have a piece of metal inside the engine. Not really a big deal right now because this is all coming apart anyway, but just keep that in mind. It did say that they're easy to break, and yes they are. I didn't lean on this. I didn't use this as a locking tool, but when I was trying to break it loose one of the times, the pry bar came out, and so the engine span whilst I was still pushing, and that snapped it off. So it's not the end of the world, but just got to keep that in mind, that there is a little piece of metal in the back of the engine there, so I'll have to fish that out at some point. It might have even fallen down into the sump, so, and maybe I'll take the sump off. If it's easy enough to do, I might end up taking the sump off, but it's kind of messy. You'll have constantly oil dripping then. I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. Alright, so water pump is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 8mm bolts. That should be all it takes. I'm actually going to get a bucket to put under here, just in case there's any water left in it. There'll probably be a few dribbles. 1, 2, I'm just checking that all these are the same size as well. They look to be the same. As I said, this is a new water pump. This actually went on only probably, what, 6 months ago when I first got the car. Well, longer than that, maybe a year ago. The water pump was one of the issues. It was leaking, I think. So I changed it for a new one. If you want to watch the video of that, go back on the channel. It'll be in the playlist for Fiesta videos on there somewhere. There's all the bolts. A little bit of persuasion from the old hammer. There we go. See, it's fairly clean in there. As I said, it's new. It's a little bit of gunk and build up, but not much coolant either. It's good. Tensioner looks like it's just two 13mm bolts. Quite tight ones. One and two. Alright, there we go. That's about all I can do for right now until I figure out how this crank's going to come off. That's kind of limited me now because I can't take anything else off really, apart from the sump. But like I said, it's a little bit dirty. I don't know if I'm up for that right now, to be honest. Or should we do it? There's no oil in it, is there? We emptied the oil. Should we do the sump? I do appreciate a good sunset. Right, so one of the good features about this engine obviously being on the stand is we have the ability to swivel it around. Just going to do it to there. That then allows me even better access to the bolts. It's just a bunch of 10mm that go all the way around the bottom. Same on the back, no hidden ones I don't think, just Just going to crack all them loose, whiz them all out, and hopefully we can just pull that sump straight off. Might be able to find our little piece of metal that we broke off as well from the locking pin on the other side. That hopefully has fallen inside this. Alright, so these are all 10 mils. Just going to crack them all. Now, even if I take all these out, the sump's not just going to fall off, at least I don't think it will. They're usually quite stuck on there with the seal, or the gasket around them, usually sticks them on pretty good, so I'm not worried about it falling off. Ah, I missed one. I missed two. What am I doing? I have a bucket down there to catch any fluid. Got a bit of coolant running out right now, and a bit of oil. Just gonna leave that under there for a sec, let it drain. Just gonna give it a few taps, the sump, with a mallet, my trusty mallet. See if I can just get it moving. Looks like we've got a dedicated little slot here for this job. It's loose. Pretty well drained of oil. There's hardly anything in there at all. There is some silicone gasket on here though, which I don't think is supposed to be on there. I don't think you seal these with silicone, do you? Actually, maybe you do. There doesn't seem to be a proper gasket on here anyway. Right, so there's the bottom pan. Got the dipstick that I just pulled out. I just wheeled it out. It's just sealed in with an O-ring. Turns out that this doesn't have a gasket on it. You see, there's just metal, no gasket on this side. No gasket on this side, apart from the silicone gasket, which has been put on. It looks like it's the factory one because it's been ever so neatly put on there. That's definitely not been done by hand. So I have to make sure I do that just as neat all the way around. I can't see that piece of metal, which is worrying me. Where would it have been? Over here, wouldn't it? It might be stuck in this tray, to be fair. I'm taking all this apart anyway, so I'll find it. It's definitely in there. I'm going to go ahead and remove the oil pickup. This is the thing that sucks the oil up and pumps it through your engine. And then there's just this plate on the bottom, which just will take this off as well. It's all dirty, look. Ugh. Oil pickup first. A couple of little 8 mils. That just seals on there with an O-ring, that end, 1 bolt. And that's it. It's made of plastic. I thought it was metal. It's actually plastic. And then this bottom baffle plate will take off. Again, 8 mils. Right, so there you go. There's the bottom of the crankshaft. You can see the bottom bearings for the pistons are here. The other two are a bit deeper down. I'm not entirely sure what this is. It sort of just looks like a structural piece of caging. Maybe it's just there for rigidity. I'm not entirely sure, but that looks like it comes out as well reasonably easily. I can't see that piece of metal, which is starting to worry me a little bit. The bit that broke off inside. Maybe because I got the engine tipped up. If I tip it the other way, it might just fall out at the bottom. Right, you ready? Listen out for a piece of metal falling. Please fall out, please fall out. Oh, I heard it. Do you hear that? Don't know if you'll be able to see it on camera, but it's right here. So good job I noticed that. You wouldn't want that going around in your engine if you put it all back together. That would absolutely destroy something, that's for sure. So I guess whilst we're here, we might as well whip the oil filter off. This is a fairly new filter, because I think I did the oil on this not that long ago. So we'll just whip this off. Right, so I think I'm going to call that quits for the evening. There's not really a lot more I can take off on this thing until I get that crankshaft bolt out. It's annoying that that's sort of held me up for a second time. In the first video when we were taking this thing apart, I couldn't take the crankshaft bolt off, so I sort of stopped where I was, and it's happened again. To be fair, the engine is pretty much stripped down completely now. The only thing left to do is, once I get the crankshaft bolt, I'll take the belt off once and for all, and then just a few last ancillary bits on there, and that'll be pretty much stripped down completely, so I'm not too worried about that. I'm going to give my next door neighbour a shout tomorrow when he gets home and see if he can just come down here, give me a hand cracking that off. But we've got a considerable amount done today. As you've seen, the engine is now essentially just a block. The head is on the workbench, the sump is off. What else did we do? We took the head pretty much apart for the most part without taking the valves out. Quite successful, I would say. I know that these last two videos have just been a strip down, but it needs to be done. I figured I would film it, and maybe some of you will learn something from it, I don't know. I think in the next video I'm going to change it up a little bit, and we're going to do something outside the shed and not engine related. We're going to jump back out onto the driveway and strip out the Fiesta of its interior. There's a bunch of parts that I took apart when I took the engine out. I want to get them out of the boot of the car, and I want to strip the interior. I want to take all the seats out, carpet and everything, because I want to inspect the shell of the car. It's something that I want to do before I get too far with this. I want to make sure that the shell is actually right, and if it needs any welding done, then I want to be able to schedule that in and get someone to actually do it for me, because there's no good building this engine and making this perfect if the shell that's going in isn't very good. So I want to inspect the shell. I'm going to get it up on jack stands, have a look underneath, make sure, you know, prod it with a screwdriver, make sure that it's all sound and solid, and if it is, then we can carry on. I'll clean up any rust that needs to be cleaned up, paint any bits that need to be painted, and then there's a bunch of stuff that I want to do to the shell, suspension wise and stuff like that, that I can get cracking on with, and I'll do this as well in the meantime. So if you're looking forward to that, there's plenty of work ahead. As you can hear, as I say it, it sounds like so much work, big old list racking off, but we'll get there in the end. Hope you guys are enjoying it so far. Engine strip down number 2, hope you enjoyed. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up if you did. It helps me know if you enjoy the videos or not. Make sure you subscribe if you're not already. Nearly at 60k now. I think we're 200 subscribers away from hitting 60k, so big milestone right there. So make sure you subscribe if you haven't. I'll see you guys in the next one.